This is Doug DeMuro, and I've just returned from driving my Toyota Sequoia all the way across the country, from California to Massachusetts, twice actually, and back, 6,400 miles total, and it didn't go so well. Let's discuss. Today's video is sponsored by Cars and Bids, which is my online car auction website for modern enthusiast cars. So far, Cars and Bids has sold almost $500 million worth of cars. All sorts of special and cool stuff like this, and this, and this, and this. If you're looking to sell your enthusiast car, reach a vast audience at carsandbids.com. Okay, so a couple months ago, I came to you and told you my first impressions of my Toyota Sequoia because I had driven it from California to Massachusetts in a frankly uneventful cross-country road trip. It was great, it was fine, everything was good, and I had some things I liked about the Sequoia, like its driver assist features and its technology and its engine. I had some things I didn't like the camo fender flares and some other stuff, but mostly the camo fender flares. Well, the drive from California to Massachusetts was uneventful, like I said, but the drive back, there were a couple of, shall we say, issues that I think need to be discussed. And we're going to start with the biggest issue, which was a flat tire. Although I posted a picture of the flat tire on my Instagram page, and about 4 million people responded and said, "That's not a flat tire, your tire's obliterated," which it was. That's true. You can see the picture here of the flat tire. So let me tell you what happened. I was driving along on Interstate 81 in East Tennessee, and I noticed the car. I had the driver assist on, so it was steering for me, it was accelerating, it was keeping its speed, the cruise control. And I noticed the back of the car started to sway a little bit. And this isn't altogether surprising because the lane keep assist can sometimes be a little wonky. Like sometimes it doesn't pick up on the lane lines, and so sometimes it'll kind of sway you a little bit over in one direction. And so I didn't really think anything of it, but it started to sway a little bit more. This is over the span of maybe 8-10 seconds. And then it was kind of really swaying. And I looked down, again, 10 seconds, and my tire pressure light was on. And I knew exactly what had happened. So first thing I did was in the gauge cluster of the new Sequoia, you can actually scroll over and get individual tire pressure readings and while you're driving. And so I immediately did that. I knew how to do that and how to find it. I went over and I found it in 2 seconds, and it showed me that the back passenger sides, the back right tire, had 0 PSI. And that was pretty clear to me. That was pretty clear what was going on because of the way the vehicle was behaving. It clearly wasn't a slow leak that was just getting a little bit worse. Like it had happened and it was going flat right then and there. Now, I'm on the interstate. Thankfully, it was in the middle of the day. And I've got my dog with me, Noodle, and the car is full, like completely packed full of stuff, absolutely every inch of the cargo area, and then half of the rear seat. Noodle had half the seat, and the stuff was in the other half. And so that's not an ideal situation. I'm trying to get from Massachusetts to California. I have hotel reservations booked. I have things I have to do when I get home that's already scheduled. I really kind of need to get where I'm going when I need to go there. And so a flat tire is actually a pretty big deal on a trip like this because immediately my mind starts thinking, okay, where in rural East Tennessee am I going to get a new Falcon Wild Peak all-terrain tire matching the size of this car? Because I knew it wasn't going to be something I could patch or fix easily based on the way the car was going to handle. All these thoughts went through my mind truly in 10 seconds. I'm like, the trip is ruined, like I'm screwed. So I realize it's the back right tire, the car's full of stuff, I pull over to the side of the highway. Now, I personally hate stopping on the side of the freeway. I think it's one of the most dangerous things that you can do in a car. There's all sorts of videos online about cars, parked on the shoulder of the freeway, getting hit by cars going 80 miles an hour. And I mean, stuff is just obliterated. And my dog's in the back. He would go flying. Even if I'm trying to change a tire on the side of the freeway and I'm not in the car, people get hit that way. They get killed all the time. Very scary. I don't like to be in that situation. So I pulled over to the side of the freeway just to see what was going on. Was the wheel off the car? Like what has happened? I get out, I look, and the tire has blown out. That's a surprise. You don't see a lot of new tires blow out, and this is a new tire. I bought the car in March of this year, So it was a 6-month-old car. The date code on the tire was like December of the previous year. So the tire is December of 23. The tire's not even a year old. The car doesn't even at this point have 6,000 miles on it. So the tire doesn't have 6,000 miles. It's rare to see a tire blowout, given that it's like a new tire in good condition on a modern car and a modern tire. But I don't have a lot of time to think about what happened and whether the tire was faulty. I don't really care about that. Right now I'm sitting on the side of the freeway in East Tennessee, and I gotta figure out what to do. So I look for the next exit, and on my GPS, the next exit isn't showing for 5 miles. And the tire is blown out. I mean, I'm not driving on this thing. I could drive it to the exit 5 miles away, but I would probably destroy the wheel. The tire would disintegrate as I drive, and the wheel would be hurt. And I was thinking about doing that. I was thinking, you know, a wheel for this car is expensive, probably $800, but you know, my life, you kind of balance saying, oh, maybe I'll drive. But then I realized that on the other side of the freeway, there's actually an exit directly behind me going the other direction. It was only for the eastbound travel and not for me, or I guess the northbound travel and not for me. And so I did the craziest thing that I could imagine, but I really wanted to get off the freeway. And it just so happened that right in the center of the freeway lanes, there was an emergency vehicle turnaround. And so I put the car in 4-wheel drive because those are gravel and I only had one rear wheel. I put the car in 4-wheel drive, and after a big break in some freeway traffic, I turned into the emergency lane, the emergency turnaround, and then I waited for a while for a break in the other direction traffic, turned onto the shoulder, and then I drove a half mile up the road and got off at the exit. Now, to me, I had already solved half of the problem because my biggest fear was not getting a tire changed, it was getting killed. So I'm already off the freeway and I'm thinking, okay, great. That alone is like a really better situation. Now that I'm off the freeway, I'm on an exit ramp, I can really think through this with a clearer head and figure out what's going on. At this point, by the way, I'm 2,300 miles from home and I'm 1,000 miles from where I had left. I'm really not anywhere for me. But the good news is, I had this flat tire right in a town, a city actually, Kingsport, Tennessee, which is not a small city. And so the first thing I did was I called AAA because I know that I have AAA coverage and I know that it's going to take them a while to get there. And I figure I might as well call them. I can probably change this myself, but I might as well call them, get them started because I've seen it take an hour or 2 hours sometime for AAA, so that I might as well get it started. So I called AAA and it was actually very easy. It's like a text-based thing. They dispatch a guy and I said, all right, I have no idea when this guy's going to show up. I'm going to start the process. Now, the big problem with the flat tire is that the back of the car is full of stuff. And although the spare tire in a Sequoia is mounted underneath the car, the tools are actually mounted within the cargo area. So I have to unpack a lot of the back of the car in order to get the little panels out on the side of the cargo area to get the jack and the tire changing tools, the tire iron, etc. But I do it. And it takes me about 8 minutes, but I do it. And in the meantime, the car's got to stay on and running to keep the air cool because the dog's inside. Get the jack and the tire tools out, and then loosen the lug nuts, and I start the process of getting the spare tire lowered from below the car onto the ground, which is quite a process in a Toyota. There's a tool you have to build. You have to stick it into a little hole and just kind of twist. You can't really see anything. You're using your phone flashlight and hoping for the best. Anyway, get the tire on the ground, get it off the car, and then the AAA guy shows up. 10 minutes after I had called. And I know how to change a tire. I have no problem changing the tire in this car, but the AAA guy is like a cheat code. He shows up with a floor jack, an impact driver, and an air compressor built into his van. He's got the tire changed in 2 minutes. Now, the benefit of this whole thing was full-size spare. Full-size spare tire, full-size spare wheel. And so I'm thinking, okay, I got a full spare tire in this car. I'm trying to get to Memphis tonight. It's like 6 more hours from where I broke down. I'm going to just try it. And so I drove and I made it to Memphis on the spare tire. And in fact, I made it all the way home on the spare tire, which was about 2,200 miles on the spare alone. It's not really ideal for a couple reasons. Number one, I don't have another spare. So if I have another flat tire, I'm screwed. Number two, once you put the spare tire on, the tire pressure monitoring system is no longer activated because the spare doesn't have a TPMS sensor. And so at that point, the entire TPMS is fault and it says, drive to dealer. It won't show me any of the tire pressures, not just the spare, but any of them. So I'm driving without a spare and without a tire pressure monitor. Not the best situation, but I did drive a Lotus Elise across the country in 2012. It has none of those things. Figured I'd be okay. And so I drove to Memphis that night, and I drove the next day to Albuquerque and the next day to San Diego, made it home on the spare tire. In fact, the spare tire is still in the car, and I'm really glad I didn't need to order a tire because I went to my shop here in San Diego that I deal with for tires and such, and they ordered it, said it'd be 3 days. And so I can only imagine if I had had the blowout and then had to wait for a tire, I didn't have a spare, I'd be sitting in Kingsport, Tennessee right now, still waiting for a tire to get on the car. So that worked. And honestly, the whole tire change process, it would have taken me probably about an hour to do it, jacking it up. It was really hot, jacking up, getting the whole thing done. The guy came with the floor jack, et cetera, got it done in 10 minutes. The whole process, I lost maybe 45 minutes on the road. I got into Memphis really late that night, but I got into the hotel I had planned and kept the same schedule. But that wasn't the only problem, believe it or not. Somewhere in North Texas on Interstate 40, maybe Western Oklahoma, the tow hitch cover fell off. Gone. I went to get gas at the next stop. It wasn't there anymore. I don't like to litter, but I didn't know what had happened. And I posted this, and a bunch of people in my comments told me that this is a common issue with the Sequoia. These are falling off, and there's a service bulletin about it. So I don't even know if I'm going to bother replacing it. I suspect the next one will also fall off, and that's just that. When I was about 5 hours from home in Arizona after driving, it's a 3-day drive. A rock came up and hit my windshield and started a crack, and I think the crack's going to get worse. That's a shame. Wish it hadn't happened, but it did. And to top all of this off, when I was on my trip, during the trip at 5,000 miles, the maintenance required light came on. It was a time-based thing. It wasn't because it actually had any problems, but the light came on. And so I've been driving around for the last, now it's at 8,500 miles, for the last 3,000 miles with the maintenance required light. And I looked up what the maintenance is at 5,000 miles, and it turns out they check the fluids and rotate the tires and check the floor mat positioning. And that's the stupidest service I've ever heard of in my entire life. And I gotta tell you, that's a total waste of everybody's time. I guess Toyota makes you do it because they wanna make sure it's in good shape and they wanna get you out $100 or whatever they charge for a tire rotation. But I'm like, that is just really a waste of time. There's no fluids exchange. They basically just check stuff and move the tires around. And by the way, I moved the tires around myself on the side of the road. So I'm thinking, all right, well, I'm going to skip this service. But the drawback of skipping that service is the maintenance required light is then on for the next however long. And there's still one more issue, which is that when I bought the car, Toyota only gives you one key when you buy a new vehicle because of the chip shortage or whatever. And after 6 months or so, you're allowed to order a second key. Well, apparently, I've hit the span where I can order the second key, so I have to get that done too. So right now, the status of my Sequoia is the tow hitch cover's off, the windshield's broken, the spare tire is on, the normal tire is shattered, the wheel is probably okay, but who knows. The windshield cracked, and I only have one key. The car is a little bit beleaguered. It's had a tough time. So I'm going to get all that stuff taken care of. Actually, it's not that big of a deal. Tire shop is going to put a new tire on, put the spare back under the car. Toyota dealer is going to order me a new key and do the next service, which is an oil change, and that'll be fine. And the windshield is just annoying. I'm going to hope the crack doesn't continue, but it probably will. I have to say, as annoying as some of that stuff was, the truck actually made the trip no problem. I can't really blame Toyota for the tire. We can blame Falcon. I'm not really sure what happened again to the tire. I've always been a BF Goodrich KO2 guy for my all-terrain tires, but this truck came with the Falcons on it, and I wasn't going to buy a new car and then immediately replace brand new tires with a tire I prefer. It's stupid. That's a waste of money. So I figured I'd at least see how the Falcon Wild Peak tires did. And I have to say, the real crux of this video, the big conclusion is, the truck was great. Aside from these issues, which are very minor, they just happen to add together at once, which kind of is annoying. But aside from these issues, the truck was great. And I needed a vehicle that could do three things, which was haul as many people as possible, go off-road as best as possible, and have good driver assist technology. And this truck, I used all three of those things immensely all summer, and it did a great job. Off-road, I have taken a lot of vehicles off-road on the East Coast where I go. It is the best of all of the cars that I've ever had there. Better than my G-Wagon, better than my new Land Rover Defender or old one. Just absolutely effortless off the pavement. Really, really amazing. The Toyota's multi-terrain select feature, you can select the terrain you're on, does a fantastic job of figuring out exactly how to handle any terrain situation. I have never felt more confident off-roading any vehicle than my new Sequoia. The driver assist technology is fantastic. The self-driving steers for you, it accelerates, it brakes. All you have to do is kind of rest a hand on the steering wheel and it'll do it all. Fantastic. It won't do lane changes for me, but I don't really care that much about that. I more care that it kind of can keep the line in the road if it curves without much input from me, and it does that, and it does it beautifully, and it did a great job. And then the number of people, I maxed out the seating capacity, 7 seats in that car, I maxed it out. I maxed out the seating capacity while off-roading several times, and it just does a great job at handling all of it. There were some haters of the Sequoia when I bought it. My wife, some of my family members, some of my friends, they think it's big, they think it's too brawny and aggressive looking, they think it's a little stupid. It kind of won everybody over throughout the summer just because of how effortless it was to handle everything I needed to do. You need to put the whole crew in the car and go somewhere, done. You need to go off-roading and pull out a car, done. With the Sequoia, I rescued 2 vehicles this summer on the beach that got stuck on the sand, one of which was a heavy-duty 2500 Chevy Silverado. That's a heavy, big vehicle, and it had gotten really buried in there, and the Sequoia pulled it out like it was nothing. And it was just a really, really, really good vehicle. So it's kind of funny because the trip had some problems. There were some issues. There were some incidents. But overall, I arrive home. The Sequoia is incredibly dirty. It doesn't have the wheel on a tire. The windshield's cracked. But I arrive home actually in a much better frame of mind about it than I had left. I really am impressed with exactly how it was able to handle everything I threw at it. And frankly, I'm really happy that I chose the Sequoia over all of the other options, none of which really kind of did everything and checked every box that the Sequoia did. I still do have the same complaints about the Sequoia that I had in the video I made maybe 3 months ago explaining, what was good and what was bad. The ride quality could be better. The technology within the gauge cluster screen could be better. It doesn't really display like map or music, which is really disappointing. And I still hate the camouflage seats and fender flares. Now, every time I post about this, people say, well, why don't you just paint the fender flares? I've mentioned before, I'll mention again, you cannot paint or wrap the fender flares in the TRD Pro Sequoia because they are textured camouflage. They went beyond just regular camouflage. They really screwed you with textured camo. So in order to paint it or wrap it properly, you would have to sand it, Bondo, and I'm just not going to devote that level of energy to a Toyota Sequoia. I'm sorry. It's costly and stupid. I'd rather just complain about it, as I've mentioned. I also can't exchange them for fender flares on a different Sequoia because the TRD Pro has marker lights built into the fenders that the other models don't have, so that they don't exchange. So that's the drawback. But honestly, the Sequoia, I now have 8,500 miles on it. It did fantastically. It checked a lot of great boxes. And I have no regrets at all about purchasing it. I'm really glad I did. And I'm going to get it back in its good condition, get an oil change, get another key, get the tire back on it, and it'll be ready for its next adventure. And there will be more to come because I am a satisfied Sequoia buyer, even though it's massive and poor riding and camouflaged and aggressive looking. It did what I needed it to do, and it did it well. So there you go. That is my trip cross country. A little eventful, a little bit crazy. And that's what happened driving the Sequoia cross country. Again, a satisfied Sequoia buyer, something I never thought I would be. Never thought I'd get a giant SUV, but here I am, and it works great.